And I never really liked working at those companies where you just go, okay, best of luck. Hope you sell it, or hope I see it in stores one day. And I think for me, I love taking it all the way to the CrossFit finish line. And where I've seen design be influential in these moments is in presentations, in pitches, and just really in creating, the portfolio of the brand or of the firm or whatever it is.
Welcome to Design Drives, your audio experience about what, how, and why design drives things forward. A podcast hosted by Sebastian Gier, together with forward-thinking design practitioners from around the world.
In this episode, I talk with Dan Grossmann, Associate Design Director at Smart Design New York, about his journey and all the learnings along the way. This is a series of podcast episodes where IDC and Design Drives collaborated in order to bring you insights from the speakers at IDC, the International Design Conference that recently happened in Chicago. We learn why it's important to follow up in the design process and learn the process from beginning to end, and actually understand how the design is getting sold and ultimately in the hands of the user. Besides learning about switching from in-house to consulting experiences and learning about the differences, we also dive into how to figure out when is the right moment to change actually job and make a move. On top of that, we also make some unique learnings about animal-centric design. How to prototype and user test your designs with dogs. Enjoy. So I'm here with Dan Grossmann, Design Director from Smart Design New York.
Yep.
So exciting to talk to you. Let's give the audience a little bit of context, maybe about your journey and how did you happen to work at Smart Design. But maybe we can go all the way back towards when you were getting into design.
Sure.
And the drive behind it.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to talk to you today. I am from New York originally, so I actually came from a family of creatives, so I was very fortunate. My mother was an interior architect, my uncle was an engineer, and my father worked in business, so I kind of had like these three different influences growing up, and spent a lot of time in museums and just like art galleries, so I was always kind of around it, but didn't really know what to do with it yet. And I'm one of these stories where I was a teenager, I was angry, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and then I had an art teacher reach out to me in my high school, and she started a graphic design program. And that was the first time that I found an opportunity to take my creativity and actually turn it into something. It was like the first person that said, hey, you can be creative and make money. And I didn't connect the dots, even though I was like around creative people. I just never thought of that was a career for me. So I got into graphic design in high school and just immediately fell in love with it. And through that, started looking to art school and discovered industrial design. And I was very much like a hands-on builder type kid. And the idea of, everything about industrial design was a perfect fit for me. This balance of design, business, innovation, working with your hands, drawing, and just like the whole process behind it really got to me. So that was what kind of drew me into it. And I took a lot of art classes in high school. So I did that. I worked really hard my senior year to get exempt from my intro classes my first year in college so that I could jump directly into ID. I knew what I wanted to do, and from I think the third month of college, I was already in the discipline, and I haven't looked back. So it was great.
And then what were your first steps in the design career?
So my first steps, I went to Savannah College of Art and Design, and in the Southeast, there weren't a ton of internships. At the time, it was a much newer program for ID, and we didn't have a lot of notoriety. But there were a few companies that had offices down there, and mostly were in the outdoor market. So I was very lucky and fortunate to have landed an internship. I think my junior year in college at Husqvarna, which is the Swedish outdoor, power tool company, and they had offices for North America for some reason in Georgia, which was great. And that was my first real experience into ID. It's funny because I remember going in there my first day and just having like this big chip on my shoulder, being like, I'm a designer. And the senior designer there was like, you are not a designer yet. No freaking way. Get to work. And I remember just being heads down 40 hours a week of sketching and just being, just like, nope, go. And that was the first time I learned like research, like in the field. They were like, you know, we're working on this new tool. And it was funny because it was almost like you were doing chores. They're like, here's a leaf blower, go blow leaves. And you're like, am I doing this for you or am I doing this to learn? But it was just like this great hands-on experience and just a ton of work with it. So that was really great. I did that. And I've always been somebody that I just want to learn. I'm just like obsessed with learning and growing my skills. And I wanted to understand, you know, how can I get better at different disciplines within the field of industrial design. So I wanted to do the complete opposite thing after that. And I went from doing power tools to perfume bottles. So I moved back. Yeah, big difference. I moved back to New York and got a job as an intern at a place called Nice Ltd, which is this international design firm. They're headquartered in New York, but I think they have offices all over the world now. And we worked with brands like Hugo Boss, Gillette, Old Spice, Valentino. And it's funny because, you know, I don't know anything about couture fashion, but there I was designing like perfume bottles for some of the biggest fashion houses. And just like the difference of, you know, when you're doing a power tool, it's all about functionality and engineering. And, you know, there's this robustness and durability and masculinity. And then the opposite end was making this object, this beautiful, simple, precious object that was made of glass that was going to be so expensive. And just that huge spectrum of design really kind of set me on course. So did that, and then ended up my first job working for a company called Lifetime Brands doing kitchen and housewares. And that was really kind of the start of my career in the field, just working for big brands like KitchenAid and Cuisinart and Farberware, and working for products direct to market, everything from kitchen tools and gadgets to just different things around the home. And it was great, really great experience. I can keep going. You want to go the whole resume?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Maybe you know, the steps afterwards. So you had a lot of contrast there from power tools, then to perfume bottles, right?
Yeah.
And then I think you switched a couple of times in your career, right? Between having quite a strong contrast, like in-house consultancy, right? But then also different product categories. So
from there, I was in-house at that point. So at this point, I've done a little bit of in-house and consultancy, and I kind of wanted to get back into being a consultant just because there's you know, when you're in-house, you kind of, your job is usually pretty defined. When you work for a consultancy, it can change on a moment's notice. And that's exciting, especially when you're young, because you want to do different things and so forth. So from there, I left Lifetime and I worked with two small consultancies over the period of a couple of years, one called Foresight and one called Prime Studio. And Foresight did a lot of CPG. They worked for big brands like Pepsi, and they just did incredible, just really, really interesting work. Very research heavy, but also like beautiful form development. And again, it was just like honing those skills. Like, how can I get really good at just like gestural, like just beautiful forms, and really learned a lot from them. And then went to Prime Studio, where it was a small studio that we did a lot of like projects in like consumer electronics and appliances, and we also worked for big companies like Unilever, and we did a project with Swiss Gear, and it was just like really just diverse, just really different diverse products, and really enjoyed that. And you know, I found myself at the end of that little time period, the economy was up and down, and you know, I moved out of being full time and became a consultant for the consultancy, and I was looking for something to sink my teeth into. And I think for me, that's kind of been the most important thing in my career is I like to invest in my work and really just like obsess over it. And so even though I was like, I want to work at a company, I want to work at a consultancy, and I want to try everything different. But what I really loved actually was working for a brand. And because when you work as a consultant, you're almost like a mercenary. Like, you're hired to like get in and get out, like kill and go. And you're like, you got to kill this project, you got to make it awesome, and then don't ever worry about it again. And you're like, wait, but is it going to go forward? Are you going to make it put into production? They're like, don't worry about it, move on to the next thing. And that killed me.
It's funny. Yeah.
So I got this random phone call from a friend of mine who was leaving a job, and he called me. He was like, I'm leaving. I work for Martha Stewart, and you should go work for her. And I'm like, Martha Stewart, I want to design cool electronics. I want to do cool things. Like Martha Stewart, she means nothing to me. And it was funny. I was convinced by several people in my life at the time, like, listen, this is a cool opportunity. This is like the first self-made female billionaire. She runs this crazy organization. You're going to be a lead role there. You got to take this. And I went and checked it out and just was blown away by the facilities and just like the broad spectrum of work that they did. And everything from different categories, from housewares to pet to patio furniture, all these things. So I was like, let's just try it. And honestly, it was the best decision I'd probably made in my career. The reason for that is because it totally changed my perspective. And I think this is where I started to like think about design very differently. And before going into this job, again, I was all about learning and trying different things and really immersing myself in the category. But this is where I started, again, I was like a typical ID kid. I was like, I want to worry about hot sketching and cool renderings and new tech and everything, IoT. And what I learned at Martha was pattern and color and texture and material.
A whole other dimension of,
Totally different. Yeah. And, when you start a project now, when we create these image boards, right? Who's doing what? We want to see what's the new thing out there. We want to see the new tech or the new competitive firm. Or if I'm working for Pepsi, I want to see what Coke did. When I worked at Martha, what we did was we went back to history. We didn't come to conferences. We went to flea markets. We wanted to be inspired by, the past. And they had this thing called the prop house there. And it was literally like a library of just objects. I mean, it was probably like quadruple the size of this room. Cataloged objects, like everything from furniture to dinnerware to like lighting. It was like this warehouse of things. And the reason they had it was because they were also a content company. So there was magazines, there was TV shows, there was all this stuff. So these props for these things. However, as a designer, I had full access to it. So if I wanted to work on a new product, I could go in there. I could just spend hours in this room, and we would.
Getting inspiration.
Just get inspiration. And then we would travel to go to like trade shows, and then we'd specifically plan, okay, well, we're going to go to antique stores. We're going to go to flea markets. We're going to go to local shops. And that was this pivotal moment where I also started learning about how products get to stores. So that's a thing. Yeah, that's a thing that we don't talk about enough in our industry. And I think it's about, we always worry about the design, and we don't talk enough about how products actually get into customers' hands, to people's hands, to you and I's hand. And when I worked at that company, we were working directly with retailers. We were working with buyers, which was my first interaction with those devils, the buyers. You do all this work, you're doing all this research and design, and here's this great thing, and then somebody walks up with a clipboard, and they're like, I don't like it. And you're like, what do you mean you don't like it? This is great. And they're like, eh. Or you'll do all this research, and you're like, the trends are blue. We have a blue story. Everything should be blue. And they go, great. Red sells better, so you should make it in red. And you're like, all right, guess I'm making red. And you start to really see just like the different layers. And I think these are the learning experiences that really kind of put me in a different course, and just really started to appreciate also just retail in general, how we shop, and, again, how products get into customers' hands.
Mm-hmm. Was it just learning by doing, or how did you?
It was learning.
Your perspective.
It was learning by losing.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Learning by again, when you work for a brand, you design for this brand, and you design for these stakeholders and these different people who are decision makers. But when you work for, I guess I'm saying that through the lens of as a consultancy. When you work directly for the brand, you're trying to then actually get products into stores. And then you're working with retailers. Then you're working with buyers. Then you're working with all these different challenges. You're working with sourcing and logistics. And all of a sudden you realize there's so much that goes into making something that is way beyond the design phase. And again, I think that's the thing I love about working in-house. And one of the things, and it's again, in-house versus consultancy, I go back and forth. I'm at a consultancy now, and we'll talk about that later. Yeah. But I think for me, just getting to see something all the way through is just so exciting. And what you realize is that things are going to change. They have to. Again, maybe the retailer is saying we can't sell this at this price point, so you have to lower the cost. Now what? Or they're saying that these colors are, I know you want to sell these colors, but this is the best selling colors notoriously, so you got to do that. Or, you know, just challenges with the factory. And when you're working on the product in house, you get to see it all the way through, and you kind of like get to be the guardian of your work. And you're like, all right, if we're going to change it, let me change it. I know what to do. Let me solve it. Versus somebody else solving it, like at a factory level, or somebody else or let me fight that fight even. Like, let me talk to the buyer, let me talk to the retailer and tell them why they should take a risk. And I know that they're more comfortable selling black and white, but we really believe color is a much better solution. Mm-hmm. So it's stuff like that I really enjoyed and learned a lot from. And then from there, so did that for about 5 years. Also worked with a bunch of different categories. Did like everything from, again, pet and housewares and home and all this different stuff. And I actually I was about 5 years in or so, a little under, and I was looking for a change. And New York was just going through like the startup boom. And it's now a big startup city, but 10 years ago we didn't have that. And I got in contact. I'm a big dog person. Mm-hmm. And again, love to do different things, looking for a change. Yeah. And this company called Barkbox got in contact with me, and they were looking to start an in-house design team. ID. And I'd never done toy design before. Mm-hmm. And they were looking for someone to lead a group of toy designers and reinvent the dog industry. And so I jumped on that immediately. I was like, yep, that sounds cool. It's different. I want to do it. Mm-hmm. And it was great. And I'd never worked for a startup before, and I never built. You know what? At Martha, I did build the team from scratch, but like the traditional ID team. But they already had a bunch of designers, and they knew what design was, and they appreciated it. And there was a lot of people in different disciplines. At Barkbox, it was like a completely blank slate, and that was really exciting to me. And again, toy design, I didn't know anything about it. At that point, I'd been to factories for, cookware and electrics, and I'd seen, freaking car factories, and got to go see where planes are built, and I'd never been to like a soft goods factory. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, cut and sew and how like toys are made and things like that, really fascinating and just really totally different. And again, a great opportunity that I couldn't pass up on. And Barkbox was also very much like the company called Barkbox is their main product. And for all the listeners who don't know, it's a monthly subscription service where you get a box of toys and treats for your dog. And it's kind of like a replenishment model, because dogs tend to destroy toys, and they eat a lot of treats. And if your dog doesn't destroy toys, it's maybe not for you, because after a year you end up with a huge pile of toys.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. So are these toys designed so they sort of biodegrade, or...
It's a great question, and unfortunately, no. It's actually probably one of the more wasteful industries that I've worked in, just because we literally are designing things to be destroyed. Yeah. So it's funny when you design for a person, when you design for people, which is a weird thing to say, but if I show you something, you're going to tell me if you like it or if you don't like. Or like you'll lie to me. You're like, dogs are just honest. Like it's either works or it doesn't work. They're either excited by it or they're bored. There's so many people who like go to the store and they go, oh, I love this thing and I'm going to buy it for my dog. And they go home and go, here you go. And the dog's like, whatever. And you're like, great, I just spent $20 on this. Uh-huh. So it was just totally different. And, user testing happens in real time. We would prototype something and say, all right, give it to him. All right. And it was just so much fun.
So you had a bunch of dogs in the design studio?
And it was crazy.
3D print something?
Oh, yeah.
Put it on the floor?
It was crazy. It was just like, there's like 30 dogs at the office all the time, just mayhem. And the speed in which the factories you work with. And we had prototypers like off-site, but also the factories in China. It's just so fast. There's no tooling. It's just, there's no CAD to send. We send illustrations, essentially. We, turn views, like front, side, back, different dimensions, color call outs. And within like a couple of weeks, you have the samples you need and you can do different variations and you test them. Mm. But one of the funny things to that is like, we call them destroyers. And it's like, is your dog a destroyer? And what type of destruction does your dog do? And you start to understand that the way we kind of create personas in the design field, you're like, and like,
so there's dog personas.
There's dog personas, which is really fascinating. And And there's like different types of play, and there's like, and these are the things you start to realize. So, when we were there, we started off just with one type of toy and one type of product, but we then created another one called the super chewer. So you have like a heavy chewer, which is a regular chewer who just chews up a toy, a heavy chewer, which maybe destroys it, or the super chewer, which is like literally anything this dog touches it's gonna ruin it. And now you have to talk about, okay, now we're getting out of plush. Now we're getting out of squeaky toys. Now we have to go into rubber toys. And now we have to worry about wall thickness. Now we have to worry about durability. And that was a really fun challenge as well, because again, never designing toys before. One end of the spectrum, you get to do plush and these cute characters and all these fun, like kind of cheeky things. We always try to be very funny and, kind of like just clever with the toys. But then we wanted to make these other toys for dogs, which were like really robust and really durable and could withstand teeth. Because again, if I give you something, like you're not going to try to break what I just gave you. Yeah. You're like, oh, I love this. I'm going to take care of it. Whereas if I give a dog something, they go, oh, I love this. I'm going to destroy it. So really fascinating. And then the last part of all that is also just to create things that were beautiful, because when you look at the pet industry, which is huge, it's bigger than baby, which is crazy. And
is it? Yeah, right.
Well, you know what it is? There's a psychology behind it. When you spoil your child, you feel bad. You're like, oh, I don't want to spoil my kid. I know I shouldn't, but I'm going to. And it's like this whole like back and forth. When you spoil your pet, you feel great. You're like, oh, I want to buy them all the things. I just want to give them the best. And there's a huge. It's crazy. And you look at the young community now, you look at the millennial market, people are having kids later, young couples are getting pets sooner, and they're just spending more money on them. So it's this industry which is growing, and you're seeing a lot of startups, Bark being one of the first ones, but a lot of startups are kind of going with it. But what you start to see, as I started getting into it, was, these are things that are on your house. They're artifacts. And I don't want to just have anything on the floor. I want to give my dog something cool. So when company comes over, my friends come over, it's not like, a big elephant, with like a crazy, these weird like things and a big pink this. I'm like, I want it to be like cool. And I was really inspired by brands like Kid Robot and like the vinyl toy movement. And you see all the work they did. And I was like, how can we make dog toys as cool as like vinyl toys are? And that was a big challenge and a big opportunity. And then we would do crazy things like we did an interactive pop-up shop where dogs did the shopping, and we'd like do Bluetooth. That's a whole thing. We go on that. But anyway, so I did that, and then did that for a couple of years, and then things changed and was ready to move on, and ended up briefly at Peloton. Peloton is a startup, and they're an exercise company. Their primary product is a stationary bike, and they're a media company. They do digital service, just unbelievable stuff.
Did you work on the ID side? Or?
Yeah, so I worked on the ID side. I was in between. I went back to consulting for a little bit and was working with their head of design there. He's a good friend of mine, and just got to come in and just do some great work with them, doing different products and different parts. And was really happy there. But I was just on contract at that point. I was just kind of playing it by ear, working on different components for their future products. And then Smart Design called. A friend of mine was working there, a guy I'd known for a very long time, and he said, we need a new head of ID, and are you interested? And Smart Design was always been kind of like a bucket list job for me. As an industrial designer, they've been around for almost 40 years. Like when you're a student, you're just like,
well-known.
Yeah, you just, in New York especially, they're just like, they're the OGs. And it was just a great opportunity, and I really couldn't pass it up. And joined them, and have been there for the past year and a half, and it's been great.
That's amazing. So I think what's also interesting is, you switched around and you experienced so many places. When do you think is the right moment, or how do you felt like there's the right moment to change?
It's a great question.
Was it an opportunity that comes in, or a personal feeling that you came across?
No, it's a really great question, and I think it's one that we as a community should be addressing bigger. Is when is that moment to jump ship, right? And it's hard when you're an industrial designer, because you work on your work is long game, right? You design a product, you design a concept, you work on something, and you're like, I want to see this come to market. So again, that could take years, and you want to maintain that control over it. So a lot of times you stay put because you're like, no, I got this project, it just started, or there's, I'm waiting for factory tooling. I got to see the first samples back. So you kind of like get, I don't want to say you get stuck, but you definitely you get comfortable. And I think there's two things. One of them is opportunity, and when opportunity knocks, you got to hear it. When the phone rings, you should always answer it and just listen, because I think moving around is good. I think trying different things and pushing yourself and challenging yourself is so important, because that's how you grow. It's how you learn. It's how you get better. And I'm someone that I want to learn, and everywhere that I've worked, I don't regret any of the moves, because I learned so much in each place, and I've worked for really talented people, and I'm someone who collects mentors. Like, I love to learn from people who are older and wiser and more experienced than me, because that's what's going to make me better, and then I can pass that along. So opportunity, when you hear it, try it. And I think what's important about that is, like, don't be afraid to do something out of your comfort zone. Don't be afraid to move. Don't be afraid to relocate. Do something different. If it's a good opportunity and it's going to teach you something and be great work, do it. So that, I think, is number one important. The second thing, I think, is be honest with yourself, because, attitude and, sanity and your just mentality and your behavior, it's so important to the success of your work. And when you're not happy anymore, that's when you really have to be honest with yourself. Because I think people hit walls. I think they hit creative walls. I think they hit, internal political walls. There's various reasons why you may love a job versus why you may hate a job. And as soon as your work starts to suffer, that's when you really need to be honest with yourself and say, you know what, maybe it's time for a change. And because when you don't do that, and I've seen it on teams, and as a director, I manage groups of designers over periods of time, and I've been there, and I've seen my other designers be there. You're like, look, it's not a bad thing. You're ready for something different. Sometimes it's the same thing, a day in, day out. Sometimes you're sick of designing dog toys, and you're like, you know what? I have 1,000 dog toys in my portfolio. I think I'm good. And it's not a bad thing. You just got to be honest with yourself. So really staying in tune with your personality, your happiness, your behavior, and making sure that your work doesn't suffer, because there's just no need. Do something different and feel good about the work you're doing.
How was it for you? I mean, it's also interesting. You jumped into different product categories, right? Completely different in-house design teams, right? Where you go very vertical, right?
Right.
So how was that? Jumping into industry or product category you know nothing about.
Right.
So I guess because this is I think a lot of people are afraid of doing exactly that, right? If they have been working with a certain type of product for a long time, they're very comfortable, and obviously they can contribute a lot, but it's I think it's important also to break out sometimes, but there's a lot of friction around that. So
no, it's another great question. I think I think when people get into design for different reasons, and some designers are like, I want to design sneakers. I'm like, I love sneakers. I just want to design sneakers. Or like cars. And you were talking about this yesterday. You were like during your talk about cars and car designers and things like that. And some people just want to do that. And that's awesome. Like, that's your passion. They're going to pursue it. For me, industrial design was about the versatility. It was just about the openness to do everything. And I'm someone that I want to do it all. Like, it all excites me. Like, there are things that obviously excite me less, and some things are more exciting than others, but I just want to try new things. And it's definitely tough, because I think over the course of your career, especially as you move up, it's very easy to be pigeonholed. People want you to be an expert. They're like, yeah, great, you can design everything, but what are you really good at? Especially when you try to get up to like a director level, they're all of a sudden like, well, you need to be able to speak about this very confidently and be an expert in this category, because if I'm at a consultancy and we get a client and I've never even worked on any type of product like that, they're like, well, what do you know? Where I'm like, no, I have experience. Let me tell you my experience with this. And, oh, this reminds me of a cool story or this good project. So diversifying my skill set and my portfolio and just my career has been a huge, huge push, I think, from day one. That's one of the reasons why I've tried to, invest myself and move around in different times and different places, because I don't want to ever have to be locked in to one thing. And, I've probably spent the most time in my career in housewares. New York and the Northeast in general it's very heavy in housewares as a category. And it was also I think the timing of just the boom of kitchen and just home chefs and foodies and things like that. Mm-hmm. And it's a great industry to be in, because food is this. I mean, I love it because it's a universal thing. It's this beautiful cultural thing where everywhere you go, people have traditions and just different, recipes and just habits that everyone kind of can share and learn from. But I think, being able to move around and do different things is what makes industrial designers great at what we do. We have a skill set, we have a process, we have a way of problem solving and thinking that we can apply to any opportunity. Mm-hmm. That's why I work at a consultancy now, because I get to do that. And that's why I try to move around a lot in my career. It is tough though. And I think you just have to be really open and really eager to learn and just confident in your skills. Because then you go, you know what? Yeah, I haven't done this, but catch me up. Mm-hmm. Give me some time. I'll figure this out. And a lot of times the best way is just to learn by doing and just hope that you don't mess it up.
Mm-hmm. What's also interesting is that you worked in different product categories, but then also in-house experience, and you work with different stakeholders. Right, you were mentioning the aspect of sales,
right?
So I would like to talk a little bit about the role of design within these companies or setup. How do you saw really design be involved or being part of the success or not being part of the success within these companies and experiences?
No, yeah, I think that's it's a fair question, because at the end of the day, you wonder where does design start and where does it end? And in some companies, you do the design, you pass it off. And I never really liked working at those companies where you just go, okay, best of luck, hope you sell it, or hope I see it in stores one day. And I think for me, I love taking it all the way to the cross the finish line. And where I've seen design be influential in these moments is in presentations, in pitches, and just really in creating, the portfolio of the brand or of the firm or whatever it is. So I've worked at companies where, we weren't just, we'd approach a retailer. We'd here's a new collection of products that we've been working on. And, we're this brand and we want to get in stores. We really think this would do well for your store. We're going to design a point of purchase. We're going to design the actual, the display, the physical display. And we're actually going to, send you maybe a video of what we did, or, just create these inspirational moments. And these are the things that are going to get the retailers excited. One of the things we used to do, I've done over at several jobs, is actually create these physical experiences in our office. So we'll invite the retailer to our office, and we'll take over a conference room or a large space, and we will build a mini store within our office. So that it's one thing for me to show you images. I can send you renderings. I can send you a cool animation. But let me show you. Let me give you the experience. And when you walk into the room, you actually have okay, this is cool. I want this. These are the tools that we have as a designer to help the company or the brand to move forward, to be successful. And I think that's what kind of has allowed me over my career to have a seat at the table in these conversations and move up a little bit, where I'm able to help with that strategy, and not just help with not just help with the strategy, but also help with that execution. To be look, here's how we're going to approach it. Here's how we're going to solve this business problem through design. And now that I've convinced you it's a good idea, let me go do it. And then you'll see, hopefully, knock on wood, hopefully it works. So, I think, at a brand and a in-house level, that was a big part of the job. It's just really making sure that it wasn't just here's the thing, but here's the opportunity, here's the experience, here's how you're going to sell it.
So I wonder a little bit how you framed that, working with these other stakeholders or convincing people to invest into design, or how did you, frame it, the impact of design, or the contributions you can make, prototyping, envisioning it, right, and then making it.
I think you just got to do it. I think the way I've always, it's about taking the initiative and just giving people the tools that they need to succeed. I've always said this to like, younger professionals, or, people talk to me, or like a student will say like, hey, I really want to get into design, but I don't have an industrial design background. Like I don't have an ID degree. And ultimately I'm like, it doesn't really matter, because no one can tell you you're not good at what you do if you show me you're good, right? If you have the portfolio, if you have the skills, and you're like, well, I didn't study industrial design, I studied creative writing. I'm like, well, that's a cool story. I could carry, great. Look how good you are at what you do. You should work for me. I think it's very similar in this category, in this scenario, where you're like, how I've been able to succeed at doing that is just by doing, and just saying, I have an idea, let me show you. And here's how we're going to move forward with this. And, you may get pushback. But again, if you come back with great results, if you give the sales team, if you give your boss, if you give the CEO of your company something to be excited about, something tangible, which is, again, that's kind of like our superpower, right? To make things real. And I was like, look, I know you don't get what I'm saying. Just give me 5, let me go do it. And I think that happens, it's funny, sketching is something that we talk so much about in our field, about being great at sketching and being great at these renderings and things like that. I think the most important skill is being able to draw on the whiteboard. The whiteboard is like the most undersold. Okay. It is everything, because how many times have you been in a conversation where somebody's not getting what you're saying?
Yeah,
like,
theoretical discussions. Right? Yeah.
They're like, I don't see it. You're like, just stop. Just let you just go pick up the marker. You go, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to do that.
Yeah.
I think it is the most important tool to be able to quickly communicate and visualize, and that's how I've been able to frame things to customers, to clients, to bosses, and just by saying, let me just show you, and just we'll get there together, but you got to trust me.
The reason why I'm asking this is that the understanding of what design can contribute, like, right. I guess was very different at all these places we have been, right?
Right. Well, so going back to my first job, I remember my VP of design, when I told him I was leaving and I was going to work for a consultancy, he said, it's going to be very different. And I'm excited for you, because you're about to go somewhere where designers rule the roost, right? So they're in charge. Whereas when we were working for this big company...
Was that to a different in-house team?
Yeah, so I went from in-house to consultancy.
Okay.
And going from in-house, where we had all these people to answer to. We had sales, we had marketing, we had, managers, we had project managers, we had all these different layers. And even though we were designing a ton of great product and really cool stuff, a lot of it didn't go forward. Where all of a sudden moving into a consultancy... it was just totally different. And I remember giving this advice, being like, look, you're going to see how different that is, because now you're a consultancy, your job is to be creative. Your job is to be a designer. And not that it wasn't the other place, but like, that's why people came to us. They came to us for our expertise. They came to us it's very different when a brand comes to you and says, tell me what to do, versus when you're in-house, they're like, here's what you need to do. And I think that's probably been the biggest change that I've seen over the different jobs I've had, is just like the power and voice you have. Because again, when you're working at a consultancy, we're being approached as experts. You have a problem, we can help solve it, and trust us, we're going to show you that this is a solution and here's how you got there. When you work for a company, it's a lot trickier. And your hope is that you work for a design-minded company, a place that values design. They value designers. They value your input and position. And I think we've seen a lot of that change over the past 10, 15 years. And, I'm not going to get into the whole debate of like design thinking and design, what is that, and design strategy. But I think it's very real. And I think a lot of the world and a lot of the brands have caught up on it. And we're starting to see the reemergence of the in-house design team, which is big. I think a real big movement right now. That designers do have a louder voice and a stronger point of view in a bigger company and organization.
Do you see this continuing like it is at the moment? Or?
Yeah, I think I was talking about this with someone yesterday. It feels like I feel like it's like a pendulum. Like there's just like pendulum that's swinging. And there was a period of time where design firms where we were kings. And, you know, it was like, that's where you went for the best work, and that's where all the innovation happened. And then those design firms taught the world how to design and how to think. And we're like, look, you can do it too. And then it's come back this way, the pendulum. And now we're seeing these unbelievable design teams in-house. You know, just like these huge, like, I mean, again, I work for a consultancy, and I think our team right now is I think we're about 12 industrial designers, you know, full-time with interns and things like that. You know, there's companies here that have teams of 30 plus industrial designers, and they're in-house, and they're cleaning up. They're winning all these awards downstairs, and it's awesome. And that's exciting because, you know, you go, wow, like the power of design is real, and all of a sudden you're seeing it happen in-house, not just out. So I do think it's a pendulum, and we'll see with it. It'll probably swing back.
Interesting.
Yeah. But as of right now, I think it's kind of going that way, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any, you know, big trends in terms of, you know, industrial design that you think will, you know, change the discipline moving forward?
You know, I think the biggest change that I've seen is expectations. I think client expectations have changed. I think we're, you know, we as a society and world, and, you know, just different people from different disciplines, they have a better understanding and appreciation of design. So I think their expectations are getting a little bit higher. And I think, you know, we as a community are always pushing ourselves. And, you know, with like Instagram and that whole crazy movement of like, that's a whole new way to people design, or like showcase their design, and like, you know, these websites, which, you know, they used to just be like Course 77 and we all went to it. And now you have like things like Les Manouche and just all these different platforms to showcase your work. I think the stakes are getting higher internally as a design community, and we're having to push ourselves further. But I think at a client level also, their expectations are changing, because especially with startups, you know, it used to be, there was like a period of time where every client that would come to the door would say, I want to be the Apple of this. You know, they would say, I want to be Apple of toasters. And you're like, well, good luck. Good luck with that. And then, you know, you try to explain to them how that's not realistic. But now it's, I want to be like this startup. I want to see this. I want to be like this new brand that I just saw. I just saw this article about this new company. I want to be that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's that type of information and stimuli that's really pushing our field to evolve. Because again, like, I just think that it's a crowded space, and the clients are a lot smarter, and they're a lot savvier, and they know. They've taken design thinking courses, you know, and they know how to brainstorm, and they know how to use Post-it notes. And you're like, all right, we really gotta step it up. So it's cool, and it's a challenge, but it's an exciting one.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you a bit of a personal question. Okay. You know, you have such a rich experience from so many different, you know, places, and I wonder a little bit what is, you know, your personal drive or the personal impact you wanna have with your work.
That's not too personal. Thank God. I thought that was going somewhere totally else. So it's good. I think the work I'm doing right now is really exciting, and you know what? There is something that I skipped over in my career, and that was when I first graduated college. I was very optimistic and excited about the power of design to help people, and this was like early days, and where, you know, designing for third world countries and humanitarian design was still kind of becoming mainstream. Fuse Project had just launched the one laptop per child, and that was like blowing our freaking minds. We're like, that is cool. I want to do that. And there was very few people out there doing it. This was before Open IDO or any of that. I got involved with a nonprofit called Project H Design. Mm-hmm. And we got to do a project in a collaboration with Architecture for Humanity, developing something called the Learning Landscape, which was originally this collaboration with a school in Uganda, an AIDS orphan school. And we created this scalable education system. And this is a project that I did right out of college. And it was like, it's still my most favorite project I ever did. And it was just this opportunity to do something grassroots and bare bones, and just do something really positive and impactful. Working in the humanitarian design industry has its challenges, just like anything else. And it was very frustrating and difficult. But it was very like, you know, it was kind of feeding my soul. That was something I loved. And I kind of missed it over time. So there was a million reasons why, that's a whole other story, but they're still around today actually. And they have a school. They work with a design build program out in California for young girls. It's an awesome thing. But a lot of time has passed since I've been able to do something for the community. And right now at Smart Design, we've been working on this project called the Better Bin, which is a competition in New York City.
I saw this.
Designing for to replace the trash cans in New York. On any given day, there's like 20,000 trash cans in New York City that have to be serviced over the span of their lifetime, thousands of times. And it's this really cool thing because it's this artifact that lives with us. Mm-hmm. And the current trash can that's on the street today hasn't really changed since the 1930s, which is crazy to think about, that an object that we interact with on a day-to-day basis that millions of people use has barely changed in almost 100 years. Right now we're in this competition. We're one of the finalists. We actually have our prototypes in New York City, but
I saw the concepts.
Yeah, it's cool, and it's exciting. This is the thing that I love, and this is what drives me, because when I first started into my career, as I was saying, I got into nonprofit and I wanted to help people. And I still want to help people, and I still want to do things. But what I'm realizing more than anything is, like, I want to make an impact. I want my products to be used. I want my products to be enjoyed. I want my products to be loved, and I want my products to be important. And when that's not always the opportunity you get as a designer, a lot of times you just make things. Sometimes they're cool, sometimes they're not cool, but you got to do it. Mm-hmm. This was an opportunity to, like, again, put something out into the world that was, like, positive. It's going to make the sanitation workers' jobs easier and better. It's going to make the streets cleaner and prettier. It's going to be this thing that everyone interacts with on a day-to-day. And to me, those are like the holy grail type products and projects to work on. So I think what drives me is that even though I still love cool things. I still want to design cool things. I still love, the whole art of what we do. But I want to make an impact. I want to do something positive and actually be able to help and change the way we interact and improve our lives.
Mm-hmm. Trash bin is such a great example because it's going to stay there for a very long time, right? And it's in the environment and can have such a big impact.
Right, and again, it's something we see. I mean, every street corner has one. Mm-hmm. I hope to see. It's like we always talk about seeing your design in the wild. Right? Like you're walking down the street and you see your thing, somebody's wearing it or holding it or using it, and you're like, yes, I made it. Or like, you go into a store and you see people like, oh, are you going to buy it? Like, that's like the weirdest thing when you like creep on somebody. You're like, what? Excuse me, why don't you buy that? This one's good. Oh, I love this one. And it's horrible. Really funny. But having on the street corner, on every corner in New York, really it's just a huge opportunity. So, I think what drives me is just that chance to really make something that is a part of our day-to-day lives in such a large way for millions of people to use.
The scale of it, right?
I love it. Yeah. So, hopefully, knock on wood, we'll win, but we'll see.
Maybe as the last question before we wrap it up, what would be your advice to young industrial design students?
What would be my advice? I think my best advice is to the young community is to, not just worry about now, but really focus on the past. And, kind of going back to what I talked about with like Martha and things like that. For me, I'm a little bit of like a design historian. I love learning about our industry and how we got to where we are today. And I love learning from the people in front of me in their careers and my bosses. And right now, like the CEO of my company, the founder, he's been doing this for a good bit of time, and I get to work with him every single day, and I just like absorb his knowledge. And I think, with so many challenges out in the world today, especially with the job market and just the competition in the field, a lot of designers that are young just go out on their own. And I think it's important to learn and to experience and to try different things, put yourself out of your comfort zone. Again, do a job you wouldn't necessarily take, move to a state you weren't planning on living on, and just try it. Because these are the skills that you're going to learn, and it's going to really round you out and just make you a better designer and just also kind of like a better person. Mm-hmm. So, learn from the past, like understand who are the founders of our field and who are the forefathers of design and where it all started and how did we get to where we are. who are the best firms today and why? Who are the best firms that closed down and why? Like really understand that history, because that's what really makes for, I think, a richer future. So just get out there and work and just do great stuff,
Right. Great. We need to wrap this up. It was amazing speaking to you. Insights and a very inspiring journey.
I really appreciate it. No, it's great talking.
That was the episode. If you want to give us feedback on the podcast, have something to contribute to the next episode, or just want to get in touch, feel free to connect with us either on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram messages, or simply via the designdrives.org website. We love to hear from you.